Hi everyone, I am Alicia P. de la Cruz and I will be talking about DNA and RNA. So what is DNA and RNA? DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, while RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. They are the two of the most significant molecules in cell biology, as they are in charge of storing and reading the genetic data that supports all life. So these are the DNA and RNA structures. There are two types of nucleic acids that present in all prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms. DNA and RNA allow the storage of genetic information for a long period of time without any changes in any genetic constitutions of an organism. Both DNA and RNA can act as genetic material. Both are polymers of nucleotides. Both DNA and RNA contains pentose sugar. What is DNA exactly? DNA is made up of two strands that are twisted together to form a double helix. These strands are built up of nucleotide subunits. A phosphate, a 5-carbon sugar molecule, and a nitrogenous base are all present in each nucleotide. So DNA again stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. From animals to plants to viruses and bacteria to humans, DNA defines us all. DNA folds itself into paired packages called chromosomes, which are stored in the nucleus of cells. Each species has a different numbers of chromosomes. We have 46 chromosomes which contain our genes. DNA has a recipe for synthesizing proteins. DNA synthesizes RNA by a process called transcription that is further translated into protein by a process termed as translation. So yung DNA, nagko-contain siya ng hereditary information that is passed on to you from your parents. So if you and your mom has the same color of your eyes or your hair is the same as your dad, it is because of the DNA that you inherited from your parents. Even diseases are passed on from generation to generation because of DNA. So how does DNA occupy our body? Our body is made up of billions and trillions of cells, and almost all cells have DNA in their nucleus. So this is the chemical structure of the DNA. So the DNA is made up of different bases. As you look at the side of the DNA, the blue one, that is the sugar phosphate. Each composition of this nitrogenous base, pentose, sugar, and phosphate group is called nucleotide. The nitrogenous bases are of 4 different types, that is adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. Adenine will always bind with thymine and cytosine with guanine. So this type of bonding is called hydrogen bonding. So the phosphate and the sugar are linked together to make backbone and complementary bases. They are attached on it due to the bond of angle of sugar-phosphate molecule. The linkage will eventually form a double helix structure. So that is the chemical structure of DNA. Next up is RNA. So what is RNA? RNA is ribonucleic acid. It's one of the 3 major biological macromolecules that are essential for all forms of life. So RNA, we both have RNA and DNA in our bodies, right? So DNA, it is the blueprint that contains all the instructions for all the cells to grow, function, and replicate. So yung RNA, kine-carry niya yung instruction, it copies the DNA to make proteins. So it copies and transfers the genetic code from the DNA to ensure that the relevant proteins are made. When the cell is no longer needed to make any more of the proteins, yung mRNA instructions are likely to be destroyed. Since the DNA blueprints remain intact, the cell can go back to the DNA and make more RNA copies when it needs to make more proteins. So DNA and RNA. DNA and RNA are both nucleic acids and are made of nucleotides. Nucleotides have a phosphate, a sugar, and a base, but the sugars in DNA and RNA are different. DNA is made of deoxyribose and RNA is made with ribose sugar. This is where they get their names, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. So DNA and RNA also look rather different. DNA is double-stranded, but RNA is only single-stranded. And for the bases, they both use cytosine, guanine, and adenine. But RNA will use uracil and DNA will use thymine. In DNA, adenine forms two hydrogen bonds with thymine, and cytosine forms three hydrogen bonds with guanine. In RNA, adenine forms two hydrogen bonds with uracil and cytosine, and guanine still form three.